job. Oops, I think I broke it. There we go. So one, I put my face on there just so you can see who I am. Plus, I look great in that headshot, so I wanted to make sure that you all could see it a little bit more. I'm the Associate Director for Marketing and Strategic Communications for the Division of Student Affairs. Basically, everything in my bucket is outside of academia, right? So that is everything from recreational sports to housing and residence education to the Counseling and Wellness Center and everything in between. So when the students go to class for their 15 hours a week, then they go somewhere else. That's where we take over to make sure that they get connected and engaged on campus. My background is really in team development, visioning, branding, student development and transitions. I'm an educator by trade, a marketer by happenstance is what I always like to say. And then you might be wondering, they clearly have a lot of experts about real estate. I want to tell you my expertise about real estate. One is if you are in residential real estate, okay? I bought a house once, and so that clearly makes me an expert about that. The second thing, if you're in retail real estate, I go shopping. And so I'm clearly the smartest human in the room. So you're all welcome today. What are we going to do today? We're going to do three things, all right? One is that we're going to talk about millennials and Gen Z. I think there's a lot of misnomers out there about what is millennial, what is Gen Z. Are we still talking about the same thing? Whenever I get into a room like this, people are always like, well, these millennials today that are in college. Nope, they're not there anymore, okay? We're at Generation Z. So if you're still using the word millennial to describe our 18 to 22-year-olds in college, you have definitely not been keeping up, okay? And we're going to talk about who they are, how they operate, and most importantly, what they value, okay? The second piece is that we're going to talk about gathering some inspiration about how to work with them, and also for you all is what the future holds. I'm going to talk in generalities, and here's the biggest thing I always tell about generations whenever you get in a room like this. I might tell some jokes about these generations. When we talk about generations, that there are individuals that make up these generations. So by putting everybody into a box, we are not doing a good service to them. And so I always like to put a little asterisk next to all the things that we're going to talk about. So let's take, this is challenge by choice. I tell my students in class all the time, challenge by choice. So let's see who's in the room. Again, you don't have to raise your hand, or you can lie. Nobody's going to know. So where's our silent generation? So folks that were born between 1925 and 1945. Shout out, right? Give it up for our silent generation. Boomers, we're our baby boomers, so 46 to 64. Okay, nice. Give it up for them, right? A little quick. You notice my favorite part is when you go from silent generation, people are like, all right, way to be here, right? You get to boomers who are like, all right, you're still here, okay? Time to move along, right? Generation X, where are you? 65 to 78, okay? Yes, you can give it up for Generation X, right? Also known as the latchkey generation, so they're just happy that you recognize them today, which is really good. Millennials, where are you? 79 to 95, okay? That means that you were born in those times, okay? Nice work. And then Generation Z, you were born from 96 to 2010. That's right, yeah, way to clap it up for them, right? You know, the future is ours, right? Well, not quite yet, okay? They're not ready to pass the keys. All right, so here's the other piece about percentages, is that when you look at the swatch, and this is American-centric data, okay, so this is the United States of America, is that 22% of our population are defined as baby boomers, okay? As you start moving forward, Generation X, smallest of the four major generations in the country, and then as you move on, millennials make up about 22%, and then Generation Z is 26% of the population. The buying power of millennials and Gen Z over the next 20 years is going to become much more important. And for the work that you're doing, how do we connect with them to really impact our future, okay? Now, when we think about generations, and if you go into, there are a litany of books out there about how do we define a generation, right? And every researcher will always tell you different things. For me, I prescribe to the idea of events, that events during a given time are what really makes a generation what it is. Okay, so when we think about the silent generation, grew up in the Great Depression, right? My grandfather grew up in the Great Depression. I was telling somebody last night, he was the type that actually would take his paper towels, wring them out, and then hang them on the clothesline just so he could reuse them, right? So a product of the generation saw that happen. We think about boomers. You grew up in Watergate, in the Civil Rights Movement. Generation X, it was about MTV, right? Video killed the radio star, right? Anybody? No? Okay, you'll go look that up later. The Challenger disaster, right? For millennials, it was about 9/11, internet, Columbine, which shifted our safety in schools forever, right? And then Generation Z is really about Sandy Hook, the Great Recession, right? That's those moments that they were defined by. When you also look at generations, you can also think about who raised who, right? By and large, millennials were raised by boomers, and by and large, Generation Z were raised by Generation X. Now, that's, again, by and large, right? You might be sitting there and be like, well, I have a young whatever at home. Cool. That is totally awesome. It's just by and large how we begin to see some things unfold. I will talk at the end about how some researchers are starting to see some overlap, depending on who raised who, at the end of our conversation today. Here's the thing about generations, though. They're just words. They are made-up words that people came up with, right? Millennials were not always the millennials. They were Generation Y, right? And they were also echo boomers, right? And every time there's a new word that comes out, millennials just happens to have stuck, right? Generation Z, right? I don't know what they're going to do after Generation Z. Are they going to wrap around the alphabet, right? Are they going to be like Generation AA, right? Sounds kind of weird, right? But by the time we get there, who knows? They might need AA. Anyway, so again, just words, right? It's made up by the media more than anybody. Researchers, and all we want to do is just be able to figure it out, right? That's what we're trying to do, is just figure these people out. My favorite thing about media in general is that all of a sudden that when we get a younger generation, we want to blame them for all societal qualms, right? Is that my favorite thing to do is to actually Google what millennials have killed in a certain day, right? And so all of these promiscuous millennials are killing McDonald's, right? They're killing Buffalo Wild Wings and Applebee's. They're killing department stores, right? The retail folks in here are like, yeah, those damn kids, right? So again, they're killing everything because we want to blame them for societal, like what's going on in society, right? Now, here's my favorite one. This was on CNBC. Millennials are blamed for killing the canned tuna industry. No, you hurting dolphins and preservatives have killed the canned tuna industry, okay? It's not young people that, we like our tuna in a bag, okay? So all you have to do is just switch how you're delivering it, right? But again, we blame everybody, right? But this is not new for millennials, is that we've also done it to Generation X, okay? Here's the things that you have killed. You might not be able to see that, but you killed lead-based paint. Way to go about that one. Film cameras. Blockbuster, okay? You killed the radio. You killed the midlife crisis. The yellow pages, right? Still don't know why we still get yellow pages anymore, right? But you did that, Generation X. And you can find a list like this everywhere. For every generation, you can just type in, what did the boomers do to the world, right? Is because all of a sudden as we get older, we turn to the old person down the street that's like, these damn kids stay off my lawn, right? That's what happens to us. But how do we start thinking about that differently, right? Because generations, we're still exploring them. Media, and there's already 17 different books about Generation Z. They have barely made it into the workplace, and already we have figured out the silver bullet to Generation Z. No, you haven't. We haven't even figured out boomers, right? We haven't even figured these things out, because people are inherently what? They're people, right? And so we have to keep exploring. The other piece about seeking understanding, and I mentioned this in the beginning, is that the only way to actually know somebody is to what? Have a conversation with them. Don't just Google things about how to connect with the kids today. It's not going to work out for you, okay? Go and talk to the kids today and really what they're thinking and feeling. And not just yours, okay, because they're going to give you whatever answer that you want to hear, right? Go and talk to those employees that you just hired. Get out of the C-suite and go and talk to them, right, about what are they experiencing and what is that life. Last night I saw somebody talking to 3 of our MSRE students. That's exactly what you should be doing, right? A CEO is coming down and talking to the people in the trenches every day. That's how we seek understanding. Because you can constantly just be constantly going back and forth about all the things that you see online, or you can actually just talk to a human, right, and actually figure that out. Now, again, I talk about media. When you look at Time magazine, you can see the way that we all of a sudden then we put some inferences on our mind. We imprint our mind about what we think young people are like, right? So Generation X, right? My favorite one was like the Mountain Dew commercials, right? It was like Generation Extreme, right? Not everybody here was going bungee jumping in the 80s, okay? And if you were, totally cool, right? Millennials, it was about me, right? Well, yes, but there's also a lot of other great positive things that the millennial generation has done. And then again, Generation Z, not everybody is picking up a picket sign to go and protest, okay? That's not what it is. But we all of a sudden have now told ourselves, this is what the generation is going to be like, right? That's not necessarily true. So today, what I want to do is talk about who they are, and I want to point out the differences between millennials and Gen Z. Now, for my millennials and Gen Z in the room, okay? I'm going to talk in generality. So if you're like, no, that's not me, okay? I'm different. Still hire me over here. I'm different than that, okay? There's positives and there's positives and negatives to every generation, okay? So let's talk about the basics, all right? So when we think about millennials, we were raised, I can say that because I'm part of the group, on Facebook. Facebook was it for us, right? I remember going to my freshman orientation. The orientation looked at me and goes, hey, you know what? You should join this thing. It's called thefacebook.com. And I was like, what? That sounds terrible. I have a MySpace. I'm good, bro, okay? Thank you so much, right? But it's about 2 screens. If you ever watch a millennial, it's always about the cell phone and the TV. As older Americans also got into that, so now you do the same thing, right? 3D, the 12-second attention span, right? 12 seconds to grab a millennial's attention. By and large, millennials were risk takers. If you think about who they were raised by, baby boomers, right? The hippie generation. Go with what your life brings you, right? This is the world. It's your oyster. And they're like, all right, let's just dive right in. Much more public, right? Because the social media was new for millennials, and they were putting everything out there. Everything that they do. Every time they had a meal, they were taking a picture of it and telling the world about it. I remember when in my freshman year, I put my class schedule on Facebook because they had an app for that on Facebook, and you actually put your class schedule and where that location was, right? That's crazy, right? You were telling crazy people where you were. Also, by and large, millennials tend to be much more optimistic. They are much more half glass full versus half glass empty. Now, let's actually think about that from a Gen Z perspective. Gen Z was raised on Snapchat and Instagram stories. It's about the disappearing idea. They were much better cultivators about what their own experience was. They learned from their millennial counterparts, right? Millennials are putting all this crazy stuff out there, and Gen Z is saying, no, I'm good. I'm going to put on things on private. Let me give you an example of this. At the University of Florida, we have these hashtags that come out for every single class, okay? Hashtag UF17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, right? What we noticed from UF17 to UF22 is this decrease in the number of Twitter posts on the day of admissions, right? So you might be thinking, oh my gosh, like we're not admitting excited students. No, not necessarily. What we were noticing when we did research is that actually that dip was caused because people were on private. We couldn't pull their data, right? And so again, you're seeing that people are much more, they are what we call cultivators in their own brand, right? They are brand aware. Gen Z, by and large, is also 5 screens. So if you have a young person at home, okay, they might have the TV on, a computer. They might also have their cell phone, a gaming device, right? Also their little Apple Watches, right? Everything going on at the same time. But they can just go between it, right? Their mind works like a big giant network. And they can just say, okay, yep, great. And they're all of a sudden just planning a whole project. They're taking over the world, right? The 8-second attention span. If you thought 12 was quick, no, we have gotten a lot shorter in 8 seconds, okay? Now, when I say that, though, that's not to say that all of these, because young people are like, no, I can pay attention for longer than that. Can you? Because I've already seen some of you look at your phones, okay? But again, just kidding. It's about engaging in the first 8 seconds. That if you give something meaningful in that first 8 seconds, they'll watch the rest of it, okay? That's why you see a lot of videos online that will all of a sudden be like this neural overload because they want to get you to the content. It's called giving a little bit of candy to get them to the vegetables, okay? We also talk about risk aversion, okay? They saw their millennial friends fail miserably, okay? And so the risk-taking is actually taking a back seat. If you think about Generation X, too, it was about that I am not the forgotten one. I have to earn my stripes, right? But there's a little bit of risk aversion there. Tend to be a little bit more private and much more realistic by and large versus their millennial counterparts, okay? I know what it takes. What we're seeing, especially at our Career Connection Center at the university, is that we're seeing a larger majority of our generations as they get younger are actually connecting with that service earlier and often because they know that the market is not what it was. Think about when they were raised. They might have experienced their parents losing a job through the Great Recession, right? They never want to experience that on their own, okay? And so that has really much motivated folks to go out there and take ownership of their world. Let's talk about millennials and Gen Z at work. Millennials tend to be a little bit more idealistic, teamwork, collaborative, this idea of multitask. I can say this about myself. I think I'm a really good multitasker, but I'm really bad at multitasking, right? Go with the tide, right? Where's the flow going? That's the way I'm going. Email and Slack. So if you don't know what Slack is, it's an inter-office communication tool. And then they want to be catered to, right? So there is a little bit of that me, right? Like, what are you doing for me in this situation? And it's a little bit different. They work to live, right? So if you're seeing this this now entering their middle years, it's very much about focusing about go to work and then go home, all right? And again, that is a large swatch of things. Versus their Gen Z counterparts, which are much more pragmatic and tend to be a little bit more competition focused, right? Think about who they were raised by, right? Gen X, I will not be forgotten and neither will you, okay? Much more driven than their millennial counterparts, which millennials were like, let's bring everybody with us, right? Think about their education system and how they were raised. It was all about like kumbaya and being all together. And then we kind of shifted a little bit. It was about, well, what are you doing? How can you motivate yourself? When we think about collaborative workspace versus independent space, there's a lot of articles right now, and especially if you look at the way that offices are designed, right? This open office culture, right, which was a response to the cubicle culture, right? That the open office culture is actually having a net negative value on the way that we're actually working, right? And so the idea of just having a super long table with a bench and a few computers, that's not what young people want. That's not hip and trendy. That is their bosses telling them we can't afford a larger space, and so I'm going to make you sit at a table, okay? If you actually look at their satisfaction at their workplace, it's a lot lower. Do we have any reason why that anxiety and depression and other things, right? How can you focus on something on your screen when everybody can walk past you and look, what are you working on? Now we're just driving competition more and more, okay? And so when we think about that, this is all just a big fad. I was reading a study recently about the amount of square footage per employee has gone down nearly 110 square feet in the past 10 years, right? From 300 plus to less than 200 in just a matter of 10 years, right? Are we doing that because it's hip and trendy? Because the Googles of the world got away with it? No, because we're just responding to it and doing a really bad job at it, right? Now, there are some companies that are doing a great job. Bumble, which is a dating app, right? Bumble just launched their new headquarters. And the way that they're doing that is about creating niches, right? It's about taking not only that there's this cubicle idea, but there's all these designers that are coming up with new ways that we can create independent space for folks. And so I apologize for that aside. I think in this room about the way that we design things has to be intentional for the future of work. Gen Z is actually good at multitasking because they've grown up with technology in their hands their entire lives. Entrepreneurs, by and large, okay? And so much more willing to take those risks. If you think about who their heroes were growing up, it was the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, right? People that just went off and did their own thing. When we think about face-to-face communication, my favorite part about, working with young people is that you have this, well, if we just put it on every time in my world, people say, well, we need some fun social media stuff. And that's the best way to reach these kids today. And I said, no, it is not. The number one way to reach a student on a college campus right now is face-to-face in person. They are much more likely to attend an event if they are going with a friend because that friend told them about it, right? And so all we do is just push more people to communication when in fact our Gen Z folks want more in-person conversations, right? Instead of just this firing an email at them. And then, again, want to be catered to just as much as their older counterparts. And Gen Z has flipped a little bit. It's about live to work. Think about how they were raised, right? Saw the Great Recession. It was about earning money so that way I can continue to live, okay? And so, again, we want to make sure that we're seeing the differences there between the two. Let's talk about just a little bit more into the data. Personal success is the most important thing in my life. Gen Z, you can see, is jumping off the charts compared to younger or to older generations, right? So again, personal success, not the well-being of everybody else, but what am I getting? And when you think about your companies, how am I allowing the individuals at the bottom of the rung to be able to actually connect, right? How are they being able to see that their one part played a larger role? It's a little bit more coaching, but in the long run, you're probably going to have a lot more net success when it comes to employee satisfaction, for what it's worth. When we think about risk-taking, right? I would like to try everything from opera to rock climbing. okay? All of a sudden, you see this huge dip from their millennial counterparts. All of a sudden, millennials tried and failed. They were the biggest triers and the biggest failures of any generation. Gen Z learned from that. They knew the missteps, okay? They understood. They researched, right? They understood about how did we get to this point? What were the negative actions that they took to not repeat those? Let's talk about numbers real quick, just about Gen Z. Gen Z makes up 26% of the population, which translates to approximately 83 million people, which is a really big number. And when we think about demographics, you can see the light blue there is white or Caucasian. You can see the orange, again, this is American-centric. 4% identify as Asian. Hispanic or Latinx is 24%, and then Black is 14%. I'm going to tell you a statistic here. Gen Z will be the last white majority generation in the United States of America. The last white majority generation. Now, you can say all the things that you want about we got to, take back our country or whatever, but the tides are changing, right? And it's not about how do we be reactive to it. It's how do we be proactive and setting up our companies to thrive in the 21st century, okay? Because that is a really real statistic. Another one that I'll tell you is that the most popular names in the United States until now were actually Smith and Johnson were the two most common names in the world in the United States. Now it is Martinez and Hernandez are the two other most popular at this point in our country, okay? And so the way that we're approaching our work has to change based on the generations, right? When we think about Generation Z, it's a dueling mindset. And this is the part that gets a little bit confusing for folks, is because they have conservative behaviors, but liberal viewpoints, right? Now, that is not in the sense of Republican and Democrat or anything like that. It's about conservative behaviors. We notice that binge drinking on college campuses has gone down exponentially in the past 20 years, okay? It's actually gone down, right? But the liberal viewpoint is, well, I can't dictate what somebody else does, right? We shouldn't make rules that prevent people from doing what they want. Focus on personal success, but also driven by power in numbers. I gave that example when I was working with students about how are we going to get students to this event, and they said, well, I was like, they really want their own personal success and to be recognized. They're like, no, I don't want to go alone. You're like, wait a second, you want the personal success, but you don't want to go alone, right? And that's a little bit of a duel there. The traditional considers family having a priority, right? Different than millennials. Millennials are having kids at a much later time in their lives than we're projecting that Gen Z will, because the family unit is going to be that much more important. They also were products of a higher divorce rate, for what it's worth, right? So if you see, it's always a backlash, and it's always coming back to that. But when we talk about a family, it's not the Leave It to Beaver idea about a mom and a dad and 2.3 kids. It could be a man and a man, a woman and a woman, or a dog and a wife and whatever's going on in the world, right? Or and only one kid or no kids or whatever's going on. You don't get to decide what a family looks like. And that's something to really think about when you're thinking about just your marketing pieces. What are you putting out there in the world? Are you selling the Leave It to Beaver? If that's what you're selling, you're going to miss the train in about 10 years when these folks come barreling through. Values education, but also knows that education is not the be-all, end-all, right? They're heroes, the Mark Zuckerbergs, right? They did what? They dropped out of college. We're seeing that a lot, and especially our students that come in, about what are you doing for me now, and how can I get through this as fast as possible to get to my career? Financially savvy and aware, and think globally, not just locally. When we think about savviness, tend to spend less on frivolous items. However, okay, they are willing to spend for quality, right? Because it has a message behind it, right? I wear Patagonia, right? Because it gives back to the world, right? It's also a $250 jacket, but that's cool too, right? Again, there's a little bit of a fight there in their own minds. Let's talk about in their feelings and in their values. 72% of Gen Z believes in racial equality, and these numbers are about probably 3 years old. I would venture to guess these are actually higher. 64% believe in gender equality, and 48% believe in sexual orientation equality. Equality is everything to this generation, okay? When we talk about Gen Z wants to earn their success, not be discovered. Millennials, it was about how do I become famous, right? How to become an influencer, okay? Gen Z wants to grind. They want to put their nose to the grind sound and go for it, okay? They believe that equality is a non-negotiable. It's a non-starter in a conversation about how do we make sure that everybody has it's not enough to have that different representation at a table. It's about making sure that those voices are equal at the table, okay? That is critically important. They care about family and finances and privacy, right? They care about identity, right? And that's not this like mushy gushy idea of identity. It's about treating people as an individual, right? How do I make sense of the world? They also care about their outlook is a little bit skewed because their parents experienced the Great Recession by and large. So again, they have a little bit of a negative outlook. And then again, social issues are at the forefront of what they're trying to aim at. And they want brands to be so real that they can be unique. So the uniqueness factor is everything. What do you do that's different than anybody else, okay? Patagonia was not the first that came out with this whole nature and conservation idea, but they're one that won the battle, okay? They absolutely won that battle, especially with the youth market today. If you think about, if you go on Instagram, right, and maybe your ads might look a little bit different than our younger generations, right? But you can see bird shoes, right? You can see all these things that have quality and they are unique that not everybody else has. Here's a side hustle thing. Yes, everybody has the same exact thing, okay? But we're selling uniqueness. I always get this question about like, what is the most popular social media for the youths today? 74% of Gen Z spend their time outside of work or school online, and that's nearly 100% now for work and school is spent online. YouTube is the #1 most popular social media channel in the country right now for the Gen Z market. If you ever do, I tell you do this. Just kind of Google just something random in your city. I like to play a game of like University of Florida insert program here, and you will not believe the number of students that just have a random camera in their car telling you all about that experience, okay? 15 minutes of people just staring at a camera. And you know what? The crazy part is they have like 15 million views for some of these things. It's incredible, right? People are searching things before they buy. Instagram is the #2 most popular right now. It is winning the battle between Snapchat and Instagram. There's a great TechCrunch article if you're ever interested. Snapchat was the first to come out with disappearing content. Instagram actually admitted that they stole the idea. Is that they went in, they found a developer from Snapchat, and they said, yeah, we stole it. We saw nothing proprietary about what their algorithm can do, and we built our own. Instagram is now winning the war, okay? They are winning the battle right now versus Snapchat. Not to say that Snapchat's going away, just that stories is the #1 growth market right now. Facebook is still out there. Facebook is tanking hardcore because of their privacy concerns. Because if you think a younger generation wants to be private, also the other thing that's ruining Facebook, older people, okay? You are definitely ruining social media. The number of students that tell me about how mom comments on their photo is real embarrassing. Dads, you do it too, okay? So you don't get out of this scot-free, okay? But like, oh my gosh, Mario, you're so funny. I love this. Mario's like, Mom, are you killing me right now? Are you kidding me right now? Like, this is ridiculous, right? Stop doing that. Let them live their lives, okay? Students, also don't friend your family. And then you can also see some other ones that are in there. Here's a fun stat for you. I was reading a real estate magazine, actually, that 40% of Gen Z say working Wi-Fi is more important to them than working bathrooms. Take that one into consideration, okay? I hate going to Target and you have to like log onto their Wi-Fi, but their Wi-Fi drops and you're like, oh, I just have to price compare. How dare you, Target, okay? If you're not putting Wi-Fi ports in every building that you build, do it. Yeah, it's pretty bad. 40% though, that's pretty crazy, right? Like somebody would, anyway, I won't go into it. But again, just a fun little thing. So here's the thing, the world is ending, right? We can all, I meant to do that. Dramatic effect, right? The world is ending, right? Like these young people are going to ruin our world that we grew up with, right? People have said that every 20 years we say that the world is ending, right? This is the only time in American history that we actually have more people living in our world, more generations at one time than ever before, okay? So you see all this conflict that's happening. Of course it's happening, right? It's because we have older Americans and younger Americans with clashing values, okay? But there's actually hope, okay? Hope is not lost when it comes to working across generational lines. There's this great author, and she's a researcher from Miami University in Florida, and her name is Megan Gearhart, and she talks about this concept of gentelligence, okay? She basically just thought of a cooler word than emotional intelligence, okay? But she talks about building a relationship and connecting with other generations, right? About the younger folks, about passing down experiences. I am from Boston. Anybody else from Boston originally? Just me? Okay, cool. Then you're probably going to hate my next thing about Tom Brady. That's a six-time Super Bowl champion. For those of you playing it, thank you so much. The one guy. Everybody else hates me. Okay, so Tom Brady does something pretty important, though, and this was in Inc. magazine, and he does something very, very important. Every time a new player enters the locker room, he goes up to them and says, "Hi, I'm Tom Brady." Same 4 words every single time, okay? Okay, Kyle Van Noy, who's a linebacker for the team, talks about this in an interview, and he says, "Oh my gosh, like Tom Brady just came up to me and said, 'Hi, I'm Tom Brady.'" He was like, "What? Are you kidding me? Like, you're Tom Brady. You are the Mr. Football. Why are you coming and introducing us?" So they asked Tom Brady, and he says, "Well, I just believe that if we're going to work as a team, then we actually have to know each other." And he actually means that, and he does this for every player. And in fact, about 25% of his team is closer to his son's age than actually his own, okay? But he breaks down those lines. If you are not going out there into the trenches every single day and showing people the work that you're doing, again, all you have to say is, "Hi, I'm Tom Brady," and it goes a long way. A handshake and looking somebody in the eyes. It's the same thing that you might have been taught as older Americans, right? Is to look somebody in the eye and shake their hand, right? Those things have not changed. Tom Brady is just a clear example. Did I mention he's a 6-time world champion, okay? For all the haters in the group. So here's my quick little 4 things about Gen Z and working with today's market is, number 1, we have to build trust. And I'm going to give you some example. Being transparent, remaining authentic, and make them matter, okay? And so I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Trust is the name of the game. The fun part is if you ever type in the word trust to Google, you will see that trust, by and large, since the 1950s and beyond, has been going down, okay? In the United States, trust across things. So you can see public trust in government, right? That one little spike, by the way, that happens, that's in 01. That's after 9/11, FYI, so that little spike that happens. But then you can see it comes crashing back down. The Americans' ratings of honesty and ethical standards of clergy, right? When you can see trust by political party has been going down. You can see that Americans' trust in the mass media has been going down. Here's my favorite thing. If you ever Google the most and least trusted companies, you'll notice that supermarkets, by and large, and some banks are up there, okay? So kudos if you're on that list. If you're not, do better, okay? But you can see about the least trusted companies, what do they have all in common? They're either internet providers, okay, or they're airlines, right? People hate to wait. And remember that slide? 40% of Gen Z would really like to see, the internet instead of a working bathroom. Pretty important, right? So why do I tell you this? Is because we have to build trust, okay? We have built younger generations that are taught to distrust other people. We are taught that, okay? When in actuality, you can say what you're going to do and then do what you say, right? Communicate, communicate, communicate. And then my favorite one is about selling without selling out, right? And I think that's sometimes a little bit hard. And as I was talking with folks yesterday, I think there's actually more people that believe this than don't. But media has told us that real estate folks are X, Y, and Z, right? And so you are constantly having to prove yourself in that trust factor. And then show people that you care about them, right? You have been coming up with cool gifts forever, right? Your retail friends have been, or not your retail friends, your residential friends about like leaving a basket on their doorstep or putting flags outside of houses and things like that. It's about showing that you care and having that one-on-one connection. Transparency is key, especially for this generation. This is a picture from Netflix. It happened at the BET Awards about 2 years ago. 2 years ago in Hollywood, there was a lot of big concern about underrepresented groups being actually represented in film and media. So Netflix came out with this entire campaign. This is actually based on a Dizzy Gillespie photo from the 1960s, about the civil rights movement, which is actually, it's called A Great Day in Hollywood. And so again, this is based on A Great Day in Harlem, Great Day in Hollywood, but showing people exactly what are we doing as a company to actually meet those demands, Remember, generations are changing. Demographics are changing. What is your company specifically doing to actually meet today's challenges, right? Netflix answered that charge, and they show exactly, these are all the different actors that were in Netflix productions. So again, being transparent and telling people. Let me give you a micro example. Will Atkins is actually our executive director for multicultural and diversity affairs at the University of Florida. We actually on our campus had a lot of conflict, especially with underrepresented groups. You can see falling admission trends and a lot of other things, okay? Well, there was a lot of big uprising about what is MCDA, or Multicultural Diversity Affairs, doing to actually listen to students, right? Well, he did something. Every time he goes to a meeting with students, with faculty or staff that is having a conversation about race or religion or gender or whatever it might be, he posts about it. And now he has thousands of followers, right? Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. But think about all of you. What are you doing every day? How can you be more transparent, allowing younger folks to actually follow you? Also, if you have not cleaned up your social media, you can see a lot of people have failed at that. So making sure that you clean that up before you go public to the world. But again, being crystal clear with folks. I apologize, there's a bad word on here. When we talk about authenticity, right, is that we've done a really bad job in marketing over the past couple of years. You can see Mario. He's the person who's a potential customer. And then you see your product, right? So you eat the flower, what happens? What happens when you eat the flower? You spit fire, okay? So if you have never played Nintendo, I highly suggest it, right? All the time, Nintendo, by the way, for the younger crowds, was an old gaming console. So I just want to make sure that you're in the know, right? So again, all the time what we're doing is we actually talk about our product, okay? Younger generations don't care about your product. They have been marketed to their entire lives, okay? Their daycare had some sort of internet thing that you could watch when they were kids, and it had an ad at the bottom, right? They know what marketing looks like. But here's the difference. What we want to talk about is this. We want to talk about the fact that Mario spit fire, okay? Look at BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed is a perfect example of this. BuzzFeed, they always have these like travel things. It's like BuzzFeed, traveling to Abu Dhabi, right? But then at the end, all of a sudden you see, oh, also Delta helped me get there, right? About creating the narrative and making sure that it's an authentic story, not just one that you publicize. Because a younger generation can cut through bullcrap like you read about, right? We put stuff out there all the time for students who are like, that's not real. Again, the trust piece, right? So again, how do we make authentic content? Here's another piece. I'm going to talk real briefly about influencers. Anybody know who that is? Who is it? It's a Jenner, okay? She did something really important last summer. She made one comment. One comment. It said, Snapchat is dead. That's exactly what she said. The stock price the next day dropped incredibly, okay? So when we think about the influencers that you have in your network, who are the influencers that are talking about your space, your building, what you own? What are they saying about it and doing what we call social listening, okay? Snapchat stock price is actually half of even that now. They're trading in the 6s right now. And so again, that was all, what they're doing is they're blaming Jenner for it. But again, she said one comment. She also, just for what it's worth, was paid $1 million by Instagram to say that, okay? So again, if you don't think that influencers matter, they kicked everybody off of that app. Well, also the fact that the CEO at Snapchat doesn't listen to its consumers, but that's beside the point. Fyre Festival. Anybody go to Fyre Festival? No? If you don't know what Fyre Festival is, there's a great documentary on Netflix. I think the Netflix one is better than Hulu for what it's worth. But Fyre Festival was this failed festival in the Caribbean, in the Orange Square, right? When the Orange Square happened, all of a sudden everybody was buying up tickets for the Fyre Festival, right? Everybody was buying them up. And then they got there and they realized it was a like middle class humanitarian crisis when they got there, right? The tents were in shambles. The cheese sandwich, right, was the #1 post on Twitter. It was trending on Twitter about the cheese sandwich that they gave them. But the reason I talk about this is because there's a lot of power in some of those influencers that exist in the world. And the power that you have to go out and find those influencers, even if their market is really, really small. What we saw after Fyre Festival was actually this change from these large influencers to micro-influencers. And I think micro-influencers are really going to be the future right now about how do we connect to a social network that's not maybe 1 million followers strong, right? or the hundreds of millions that Jenner has, but who are the people that have these really strong followings or hold a lot of clout, right? When you go to a conference like this, who does everybody gravitate towards, and how do we do that? All we're doing is that putting it into a larger social network, right? For what it's worth, the Instagram had to change its rules because of Fyre Festival. You don't have to tell people that it's an ad. You can't just post random orange squares anymore. Let me give you a smaller example. At our university, we have somebody called, her name is Robin Clark. She's a new student this year. Robin is actually a student in a wheelchair. She lives in what's called Cypress Hall. If you ever come to the University of Florida, and we can set this up with the center, is Cypress Hall is actually is a fully inclusive, it's one of 2 in the country, fully inclusive for persons with disabilities, meaning that there's actually a track system that will help students with physical impairments get from their bed to the bathroom and back again, custom furniture just for their needs, making sure it's at certain heights, and also making sure that we can have live-in aids in the space. It's an amazing building. Robin actually wrote a blog. Robin wrote an amazing blog about where Gators live. Happens to be a tagline for our housing department. Talks about Preview in there too, about the experience she had transitioning to campus, right? Amazing stuff. All we did, we retweeted it, okay? All we did is we took that same influencer content. She happens to be connected with the Tim Tebow Foundation, by the way, and all of a sudden it got national recognition. Our board of trustees was hosting a meeting. They changed their meeting to be in that space, right? We brought in more donors than ever before because of one blog by one person, because of one experience, right? We had nothing to do with this. All we did is make sure that Robin had a platform, and we kept our ear to the ground. I won't take up too much more of your time because I know that I'm running out of it. Is mattering, right? There's a great theorist. Her name is Nancy Schlossberg. For those of you that might be facing retirement soon, her background is actually in retirement and how we as older Americans transition into that. But some of her pieces about attention, about the feeling that a person has that you have their interests of another. How do we create that, right? How do we do that on a micro and macro scale in the world that you live in? Importance, the feeling that others care about what you think and do, about making sure that you care about your clients, not just kind of throwing something at them, but what have you done for me lately? A younger generation is much more about what have you done for me lately, okay? Because in a snap, they will forget what you did 10 minutes ago, all right? It's about what have you done for me lately? Ego extension, that your successes are their successes, right? This is selling 101, right? These are things that you have been brought up to do. But how do we do this on a much more caring scale? And then finally, that somebody can depend on you. And again, trust is way down, right? You're working way harder to make deals than you ever have. And there's a lot of other reasons in the world that that's happening. But again, how do we keep doing that and make students or make other folks matter? I'll give you an example. If you ever go to Gainesville, my favorite brewery in town is called First Magnitude. It's an amazing space. When we talk about making people matter, let me tell you some of the things that they did. Number one is they built a playground in their back area, okay? Built a playground. Me, 3-year-old kid at home, right? Do I love beer? I sure do. Do I actually love bringing my kid to the park? Sure do, okay? To say that First Magnitude, and whenever my son's like, let's go to the park, and I'm like, yes, let's go, right? Just kidding, he's fine. But again, making them matter, right? That breweries are doing this at a really high rate, is that they're creating spaces. You'll see they have something about carbon neutral, right? That's important to me. I want to know that what they're putting out is actually good for the environment, right? I want to bring my kid to the park because I know it's family friendly, right? They understand a younger demographic, right? There's another brewery in town that does not really cater to the younger families, that is really much more for a college set, right? And that's totally fine. But again, how do we make them matter? And then also about seeing need, right? UF Health is building a multi-million-dollar facility in the Oaks Mall right now, okay? One is because it's already a built space, right? But it's a 10-year, 20-year lease or something to that effect, and they're actually going to put some of their specialists there. I can't wait. My kid actually goes to that specialist. So you better believe that while I'm waiting for my appointment, what am I going to do? I'm going to start shopping, right? We have to create destinations for folks, right? Just because if you build it, they will come is not real, okay? We have to create an experience that is worthwhile for them to come. Once you create that experience, we are much more apt to connect it in that way. So, real quick, build trust, be transparent, remain authentic, and make them matter. You're doing that every day with the clients that you serve. By being at this conference and working with our young people, you just have to do it in a little bit of a different way. Our world is changing. You have two choices. You can either go against it, right? Or you can go with it. If you go with it, I guarantee you're going to probably have better success than if you fight against it. Because this world depends on people like you, and I think that you're all doing amazing work. So I really appreciate your time. This is my face again. This is my email, and so I'd love to connect with you, your company, whoever, and talk a little bit more, whether that's team building or stories or whatever you want to talk about. I'd just love to be a part of that. So thank you so much for your time, and of course, go Gators.